$100,000 if you translate this without a single mistake, the millionaire executive mocked. But the cleaner silenced him. She had carried 3 dictionaries in her worn bag for 15 years. He had no idea he was making the most expensive bet of his life. The boardroom on the 18th floor of Sterling and Associates was submerged in the silence typical of a Friday evening at 8 o'clock. The last employees had departed almost an hour ago, leaving behind only the echo of their voices on the smoked glass walls that reflected the lights of Park Avenue far below. Helena Jackson, 48, dark skin glowing faintly under the cold LED lighting, moved between the Italian leather chairs, collecting crystal glasses and abandoned napkins. Her fingers, thin and calloused from daily contact with cleaning products, worked automatically. 2 years of the exact same routine had turned her into an efficient shadow that nobody truly saw. The navy blue uniform with the outsourced cleaning company's emblem was slightly faded at the seams. Helena wore it with the same quiet dignity with which she executed every task. No complaints, no unnecessary conversations, always a distant cordiality when an executive occasionally crossed her path in the hallways. Invisible, that was how she had learned to exist in that world of marble and steel. Richard Vance Sterling III was having the worst night of his 5-year career at the firm founded by his grandfather. Tall, pale, with perfectly slicked-back hair and a Tom Ford suit that cost more than Helena's annual salary. He paced the room with his cell phone glued to his ear, his jaw tense with frustration. "What do you mean you can't make it? Dr. Holloway, you were hired 3 months ago specifically for this translation." His voice carried the tone of someone who never had to hear no in his life. "Pneumonia? That's... Well, obviously, I wish you well, but you understand this puts me in an impossible position, don't you?" On the other end of the line, muffled answers only intensified the flush creeping up Richard's neck. Helena pretended not to hear, focusing on wiping invisible crumbs off the 40-foot glass table. But her ears, trained by years of conferences where every word mattered, captured everything. "There is no other certified legal German translator available in all of New York City? That's ridiculous. The contract is 60 pages of technical clauses. I need someone who..." "Yes, I understand the complexity. That's why I paid you an $8,000 deposit." A pause. "For days? The German client arrives in 4 months. I need time to review, adjust to..." Another longer pause. "I see. Get well." Richard slammed the phone down with such force that Helena thought the state-of-the-art device would shatter in his hand. He stood still for long seconds, staring through the windows at the city stretching out in yellowed lights as far as the eye could see. His older partners, aunts, uncles, and cousins who always treated him as the kid who inherited the seat by surname, were in Miami for a conference, confident that he would finally close the multimillion-dollar deal with the German investment group without supervision. This was his moment to prove independent competence, to finally silence the whispers in the hallways about nepotism and incompetence. And now it was crumbling because of damn pneumonia. That's when his eyes fell upon the documents scattered on the table. The preliminary contract in 3 languages, German, English, and French, sent by the Hamburg Law Office. 60 pages of dense legal terminology, corporate acquisition clauses, financial due diligence terms, international fiscal structures. A technical nightmare that only a specialized translator could decipher. And that's when the idea crossed his mind. Cruel, absurd, born of the desperation and the arrogance that his 37 years of privilege had cultivated. "You!" The voice came out louder than intended, echoing off the glass. Helena raised her dark eyes, tired from a double shift that began at 7 in the morning cleaning offices downtown and only ended at 3 in the morning in this high-rise. She had learned to recognize that tone. She was about to receive more work without overtime pay. "Yes, sir." Her voice was low, respectful, with the impeccable diction of someone who had studied speech for years. "Do you even read?" The question was loaded with disdain he didn't bother to hide, a smirk suggesting a private joke. Helena could have responded in many ways. She could have ignored the implied insult, deflected, maintained her protective invisibility. But something about that question, the way he asked it, as if her literacy were questionable simply because she wore that uniform, ignited an old ember in her chest. An ember buried under 2 layers of survival and forced humility. "Yes," she replied, omitting the "sir" this time. Richard laughed. It was a loud, performative sound, as if he were telling an excellent joke to an invisible audience. He picked up the German contract, flipping through the pages filled with modern Gothic font. "Great! Then I have a proposition for you." He tossed the document onto the table with studied theatricality. $100,000 if you translate this from German to English, without a single mistake. Not one misplaced comma. You have 4 months. You think you can manage that? The silence that followed was thick as fog. Helena looked at the document, then at the man who challenged her with that cruel smile of someone who mocks, never truly offering. $100,000. It was nearly 3 years of her cleaner's salary. It was the difference between tight survival and a financial cushion that could change her daughter's life. But more importantly, and this made something inside her vibrate like a long silent violin string, it was an international corporate acquisition contract. In legal German, exactly the type of document she used to translate in UN conferences, during negotiations at the State Department in Washington, D.C., in rooms where her name was announced with respect and her competence was unquestionable. Before everything fell apart, Helena approached the table, her white cleaning sneakers making a slight squeak on the cool floor. She didn't touch the document, but her eyes scanned the first lines. K. Offertrag, Erwerbsgesellschaft, Haftungsklauseln. The German words leapt off the page like long unseen old friends. "I will require 3 things," she said, and her voice sounded different. No longer low, no longer that service cordiality. Firm, professional, English without any trace of the accent he probably expected to ridicule. Copies of all related documents, access to a computer with a word processor outside of business hours, and that you do not interfere with my process until I request clarification. Richard blinked. Once, twice. There was something in the cleaner's posture, in the shoulders that had aligned, the chin slightly raised, the way she held his gaze without flinching, that destabilized him for a second. But desperation spoke louder than awkwardness. "You really think you can translate this?" He laughed again, but the sound was less convinced. "You know it's technical legal German, right? Not the language school kind of German." "I know exactly what it is," Helena replied. She let the phrase hang in the air, without explanation, without justification. And Richard, pressed by the panic of seeing his big deal evaporate due to lack of a translator, against every instinct that told him this was absurd, agreed. He agreed because he had no choice, because he was already mentally rehearsing how he would turn this into a hilarious anecdote to tell his colleagues. "Can you believe I hired the janitor to translate German?" And because, deep down in his arrogance, he was absolutely certain she would fail in the first paragraphs. "We have a deal," he said, extending his hand. A soft hand, manicured, wearing a Patek Philippe watch that cost $500,000. Helena looked at that hand for a moment before shaking it. Her fingers, red and rough from cleaning chemicals, contrasted violently with his well-cared-for skin. But the grip was firm, professional, and when their eyes met, Richard felt a strange chill down his spine for the first time, as if he had just made a bet whose rules he didn't entirely understand. "I'll prepare the copies by Monday," he said, already regaining his composure. "The reception computer is free after 9 tonight. As for payment, it will only be made after quality verification by a second certified translator whom I will hire myself. That is non-negotiable." "Perfect," Helena responded. "I will also need access to the firm's legal research systems. Consultation only, no downloading files." Richard hesitated. That was too specific. But he agreed with a nod, already turning to grab his leather executive brief. He wanted to get out of that office, drink expensive whiskey at a bar in the Upper East Side, forget for a few hours that he had just placed his career in the hands of a cleaner. When the executive elevator door closed behind him, Helena was left alone in the boardroom. The city pulsed below, indifferent. She walked to the window and pressed her forehead against the cold glass, closing her eyes for a long moment. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in years. Adrenaline, purpose, the possibility of returning to who she was before everything collapsed. She opened her worn bag with mended straps. Between empty Tupperware containers and a basic first aid kit, there they were. 3 technical dictionaries with covers worn smooth by use. German-English legal, English-Portuguese financial, French-English technical. She had carried them for 15 years, ever since she was Helena Jackson Frary, simultaneous translator certified by the University of Heidelberg, member of the American Translators Association, ATA, a highly sought-after interpreter at international conferences. Since before everything turned to ash, Helena tucked the dictionaries away and picked up the mop she had left leaning against the wall. She still had 3 floors to clean before her shift ended. But for the first time in 2 years, as she mopped the cold floor of that empty corridor, she was smiling. On the following Monday at 7:15 in the morning, Helena was finishing cleaning the restrooms on the 12th floor when the email arrived. Richard had registered a temporary email address for her, janitor.translation@sterlingcapital.com, and she had to suppress a grimace at the lack of creativity, with all the documents in PDF, 60 pages in German, plus 20 pages of English and French attachments containing budgets, market analyses, and fiscal structures. When she finally managed 15 minutes of break time, sitting in the small staff locker room in the sublevel, Helena opened the files on her old cell phone with the cracked screen. The words danced before her eyes. Gesellschaft mit beschränkter Haftung, Beteiligungsgesellschaft, Steueroptimierung. It was like reuniting with a mother tongue after years in forced exile. The first difficulty arose that same week. Working on 2 fronts, cleaning during the day and translating through the night, meant sleeping a maximum of 4 hours on good days, 3 on bad ones. Helena arrived at 9 in the evening, when the last junior lawyer finally left behind half-finished coffee cups and scattered papers, and sat down at the old reception computer. The screen flickered occasionally. The keyboard had 3 keys that required extra pressure, but it worked. Mr. Oswald, the 62-year-old night security guard who worked 12-hour shifts, was the first to notice. He had a face marked by time, neatly trimmed gray hair, and the quiet kindness of someone who had lived long enough to recognize the suffering of others. On the 3rd night, he left a hot coffee in a disposable cup next to Helena's computer, saying nothing, just nodding before returning to his rounds. "Thank you, Mr. Oswald," Helena murmured, warming her hands on the cheap cup that suddenly felt like the kindest gesture anyone had made toward her in months. The work was arduous in a way few could understand. It wasn't just translating words. It was capturing legal intent, nuances of terminology that completely changed the meaning of clauses, finding appropriate U.S. legal equivalents for concepts in the German legal system. Helena worked with 3 documents open simultaneously: the German original, her handwritten notes in an old notebook where she drew concept trees, and the translated text in Word. Gewährleistungspflicht wasn't simply obligation of guarantee. In the specific context of that contract, it had to be rendered as implied warranty against latent defects, consistent with common law principles and relevant sections of the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC. Every term required research, cross-verification, confirmation. At home, in the cramped 2-room apartment in the Bronx, her daughter Julia noticed the changes. The 20-year-old, thin like her mother and with the same expressive eyes, was studying nursing at a state university with a partial scholarship. She worked part-time at a pharmacy to help with expenses. "Mom, are you sleeping?" Julia asked one of those mornings, finding Helena asleep at the kitchen table at 6 a.m., her face marked by the notebook. "Just napping for a minute," Helena lied, rising with effort. Her back protested. 48 years of scrubbing floors on her knees took its toll. "I need to get ready for work. This project you're doing, is it worth it? You're killing yourself, Mom." Helena looked at her daughter, her reason for continuing to fight even when everything seemed lost. Julia looked so much like her father, Paul, who had died 6 years ago in a traffic accident that also took the family's last savings in hospital expenses. Paul had been an administrative assistant, a good man who never fully understood why his wife, educated in Germany, was reduced to manual labor, but who never loved her less for it. "It is," Helena said softly. Just a few more weeks, my love. This is going to change things for us. But she hadn't accounted for the complications yet to come. 2 weeks after starting the work, Helena delivered the first 15 pages translated. She printed them in the sublevel using the cleaning staff's old, sputtering printer, and carefully folded the papers inside a transparent plastic folder. It was 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. Richard always arrived at 8:30. She had noticed, stopping first at the expensive coffee shop on the ground floor for a double espresso. She approached him in the lobby, still wearing the navy blue uniform. "Mr. Sterling," she said, and he nearly dropped his coffee, startled to be interrupted by a cleaning employee daring to use his surname without the Mr. "What? Oh, you." The translation. He adjusted his tie, glancing around to check if any colleagues witnessed the awkward interaction. "You have something ready?" 15 pages. For days ahead of the partial deadline I set for myself. Helena extended the folder. Richard took it with an expression mixing curiosity and disdain. "I'll review it this morning. If there's any obvious issue, you'll know." But when he actually read it, locked in his 18th floor office with panoramic views, Richard was in absolute silence for 40 minutes. He read, reread, searching for errors with the diligence of someone desperate to find flaws. But there were none. The translation was perfect. Not just correct, but elegant. Each clause captured not only the literal meaning of the original German, but the legal intent behind it. The technical terms were impeccable. The references to U.S. contract principles were precise. There were even footnotes. She had added footnotes, explaining concepts in the German legal system that had no direct U.S. equivalent. Richard reread clause 7.33 times. Die Erwerbsgesellschaft haftet für versteckte Mängel had been translated as, "The acquiring entity shall be liable for latent redhibitory defects, consistent with established case law and the relevant implied warranty provisions under the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC. It was exactly how an expensive, certified legal translator would have done it. Maybe better. How? The question echoed in his mind all day. In the board meeting at 10 o'clock, he got distracted 3 times thinking about those pages. During lunch with a client at the acclaimed sushi restaurant in Tribeca, he barely touched the $80 sushi. How did a cleaner manage this? In the afternoon, driven by a toxic mix of forced gratitude and deep resentment, Richard did something that would completely change the terms of the agreement. He printed 20 additional pages, a technical addendum in financial English that had arrived by email that morning from the German law firm, and tossed it onto the table when Helena came to collect cups from the meeting room after a session. "Part of the challenge," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You want the 100,000? Then translate this too. Deadline cut in half. All or nothing." Helena looked at the documents. They were complex financial projections, projected cash flow analyses, international accounting terminology. She knew exactly what he was doing, testing, challenging, trying to prove to himself that the first success was an anomaly. "Understood," she said simply, picking up the sheets. That night, alone at the reception computer at 11 o'clock, Helena allowed herself a moment of weakness. She rested her forehead on the cold desk and closed her eyes. The exhaustion was physical, an ache that pulsed in every muscle. But more than that, it was emotional. The humiliation of having to repeatedly prove that she was capable, that her knowledge had value, that her existence mattered. She thought of Julia, sleeping at that moment in their cramped apartment, studying to become a nurse because she couldn't dream of medical school due to lack of resources. She thought of the rent due in 8 days. She thought of who she had been almost 2 decades ago. Helena Jackson Frary, graduated from the University of Heidelberg with a full academic merit scholarship from the German government. Specialization in legal translation and simultaneous interpreting in Geneva. 15 years working in Washington, D.C., translating for ambassadors, interpreting at OAS summits, sought after at international conferences. A 2-bedroom condo, a car, stability, respect, until her mother was diagnosed with advanced pancreatic cancer. 2 years caring for her full-time, choosing care over career, dignity over not leaving her mother to die alone in an overcrowded public hospital. 2 years draining savings on alternative treatments that didn't work. 2 years being forgotten by a market that doesn't forgive resume gaps. When she returned, widowed and with a daughter to raise, there was no longer space for a 46-year-old black woman without recent networking in a market saturated with young translators. Contacts faded. Emails went unanswered. The condo had to be sold to pay debts. And gradually, like sand slipping through her fingers, she became invisible. Helena took a deep breath, wiped her dry eyes. She had long ago stopped wasting tears and began translating the financial addendum. Her hands flew over the defective keyboard. EBITDA, NPV, IRR. Each term found its English equivalent. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Net present value. Internal rate of return. Mr. Oswald passed by at 2 in the morning, leaving another coffee and a leftover donut from his dinner. "Don't skip meals," he said softly. "I've seen folks pass out from exhaustion in this building. I don't want you to be next." "Thank you," Helena whispered, genuinely touched. The guard hesitated before speaking. "Whatever you're doing, I hope it's worth it and that these people recognize your worth. You've got something different about you. I've seen it for 40 years working in places like this. You shouldn't be cleaning floors." Helena offered a tired smile. "Sometimes life puts us where we least expect, but it doesn't mean we stay there forever." Entering the second month, the dynamic shifted. Richard began observing her. Not openly, it would be too embarrassing to admit he was watching the cleaner, but through reflections in the windows, the security cameras he started checking randomly. He wanted to understand how someone in that position had that knowledge. One afternoon, he accidentally left a document in French on the meeting room table. It wasn't part of the official contract, just an auxiliary report. The next morning, he found a precise translation deposited in his office with a handwritten note. "I believe this document may be useful for context. Translation provided at no additional cost. H.J." The handwriting was elegant, European, completely at odds with the image Richard had constructed in his head. It deeply unsettled him for reasons he couldn't articulate. The second major twist happened 6 weeks into the work. Helena was on the 40th translated page when the German client called. Richard was on a video conference when the news dropped like a bomb. Dr. Klaus Hartmann and his team of lawyers were moving the visit to the U.S. up from 4 months to just 2 months. Exactly 60 days from that date. "But Dr. Hartmann, we agreed on a timeline." Richard tried to argue, watching his forehead start to sweat on camera. "I apologize, Herr Sterling, but an opportunity arose with another U.S. corporation should this deal not materialize. We need a rapid decision. 60 days or we miss the quarterly fiscal timing." The German's voice was polite but inflexible, laced with his characteristic guttural accent. When the call ended, Richard stared at the black screen for long minutes. His office, decorated with expensive modern art and award-winning designer furniture, suddenly felt like a luxurious prison. He had staked his credibility on this deal. The old partners, including 2 uncles and a cousin who always disparaged him in meetings, were waiting for his failure to finally remove him from the board. He needed that complete translation, and he needed it in half the time. With heavy steps, Richard descended to the service area in the sublevel. It was 2 in the afternoon on a hot Thursday in March. Helena was cleaning mops in an industrial sink that smelled of disinfectant, her hands submerged in soapy water. When she saw him enter, "Executives never came down here." She paused, waiting. "I need to talk," he said, and for the first time there was something approaching humility in his voice. They went to an adjacent small room, a cramped space with cleaning supply closets and a noisy fan. Richard remained standing, loosening his tie. Helena waited in silence, drying her hands on a rag. The client moved everything up. 60 days, not 4 months. He stared directly at her. "I know it's inhuman, I know it wasn't the agreement, but I'll double the amount. $200,000. Everything ready in 2 months." Helena was very quiet. $200,000 was an amount that would completely change her life. It would pay for 2 years of Julia's college tuition. It would pay off accumulated debts. It would allow her to seek work with dignity, without desperation. But it also meant even less sleep. It meant destroying a body already pushed to its limit. She looked into his eyes, for the first time truly looked, without flinching, without making herself small, and Richard saw something there that made him involuntarily step back. A sharp intelligence, hidden for 2 years beneath a mask of invisibility. A strength forged in years of survival that he would never need to possess. $300,000, Helena said, her voice firm as steel. And access to the firm's professional translation software. Not just the reception computer. I need the CAT tool, the German legal term base, and access to the digital technical dictionaries for which you hold a corporate license. Without those tools, I cannot guarantee the necessary speed while maintaining quality. Richard blinked, surprised. She didn't just know those software existed. She knew the technical names. CAT tool. Computer-assisted translation. How do you accept or not? Helena cut him off. There was no time for explanations, and she had learned that mystery sometimes worked better than transparency. I accept, he replied, because he had no choice. That night, when Helena gained access to the professional workstation temporarily installed in an empty room on the 14th floor, she almost laughed. That software, SDL Trato Studio 2021, was a version 10 years more advanced than what she had used in her Washington, D.C. days. The interface had changed, but the logic remained. Her fingers navigated the menus with a dormant familiarity that returned like muscle reflex. The work intensified to almost unsustainable levels. Helena slept 3 hours a night, alternating between cleaning during the day and translating through the night/early morning. Her dark skin acquired a grayish tone of exhaustion. She lost 5 pounds she couldn't afford to lose, her cheeks becoming hollow, her eyes seeming larger in her thin face. Julia was frightened. Mom, you have to rest. This isn't sustainable. You're going to get sick. Just 1 more month, Helena promised, holding her daughter's hands. 1 month and everything changes. Trust me. But then the complication no one expected arose. Edward "Ed" Sloan, Richard's corporate rival, was the kind of man who saw opportunity in every corporate corridor. Tall, bald, with small eyes that constantly analyzed, he had informants in various companies. Bribed secretaries, disgruntled junior lawyers, people who sold information for money or the promise of future positions. That was how he learned about the big deal Richard was closing without the supervision of the older partners. A corporate acquisition contract with a German group would be worth millions in commissions. Insider information about the terms? It was pure gold in the financial market. He could position investments, anticipate movements, profit before the deal went public. Ed also found out about the urgent translation. And when he learned it was being done by a cleaning employee, information too absurd not to investigate, he decided to make an offer. One February evening, at 10:05, Helena was leaving through the side parking lot door when a black Mercedes S-Class pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, revealing Ed Sloan with his used car salesman smile. Helena Jackson, right? He called her by her full name, and the fact that he knew it put her instantly on alert. Who wants to know? She stopped, maintaining a safe distance from the car. Someone who can make your life a lot easier. Ed gestured toward the passenger seat. 5 minutes of conversation. I just want to make a business proposal. Helena thought about continuing to walk. Her survival instinct, sharpened by years of hard living, screamed that this was trouble. But curiosity, and perhaps the extreme exhaustion that lowered her judgment, made her get in the car. The interior smelled of expensive leather and men's cologne. It wasted no time. I know you're translating a German contract for sterling. Big deal. Important one. He leaned in slightly. I just want a quick look at the documents. I won't copy, I won't leak. Just a look, to know the terms before they go public. I'll pay you $50,000. Clean money, no taxes, no questions asked. $50,000. 3 seconds of access to digital files. It was so easy. A screenshot, a quick send via cell phone. No one would know. Helena looked at her own hands. Red, wounded from abrasive products, numb in some fingers from scrubbing cold floors. She thought of her daughter, the bills, how many things 50,000 would resolve. But then she thought of something more important. She thought of who she was. Not just who she had been as a certified translator with an impeccable reputation in Washington, D.C. She thought of who she chose to be every day in every decision, even when no one was watching. "No," she said, opening the car door. "You're a fool," Ed hissed. "People like you don't have the luxury of being honest. You think Sterling will respect you afterward? You're just a temporary tool for him." "I know exactly what he thinks of me," Helena replied, stepping out. "But what I think of myself matters more." She slammed the door shut and walked toward the bus stop, her heart pounding fast. She waited 40 minutes for the bus that would take her on an hour and 20-minute journey to the Bronx, transferring twice, squeezed between exhausted people returning from night shifts like her. It was only when she lay down on the thin mattress in her tiny room, with Julia sleeping in the next room, that Helena allowed herself to tremble. 50,000. She had refused 50,000. But she also knew she would sleep that night, and Ed Sloan would not. As she plunged into the final documents, now on page 67 of 85, translating dense clauses about shareholding acquisition and financial due diligence, Helena realized something that made her nauseous. Hidden in the technical German language, camouflaged in subclauses of subclauses, were irregularities. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands not declared in the preliminary financial statements. Transfers between subsidiary companies that created a complex web suggesting potential money laundering schemes. Fiscal structures that weren't illegal per se, but were on the fine edge of legality, exploiting loopholes likely to be closed by deep investigation. If she translated faithfully, she would be documenting financial crimes. If she omitted or warned, she would lose the payment and possibly put herself at risk. People who move sums like that don't appreciate interference. The ethical dilemma tore at her conscience for an entire week. She translated mechanically during the pre-dawn hours, but her mind was elsewhere. Was it possible that Richard himself knew about the irregularities? Or was it a scheme by the German partner he was being fooled into participating in? Helena barely ate, her stomach churning with anxiety. She lost more weight. Twice she almost passed out during the daytime cleaning shift, having to lean against walls and breathe deeply until the dizziness passed. It was Mr. Oswald who realized something beyond physical exhaustion was consuming her. One stormy night when rain hammered the windows, and she had been staring at the screen for over an hour without typing a single word, he approached with 2 coffees. "Whatever you're carrying," the security guard said in his gravelly, kind voice, "don't carry it alone. I've seen too many people break themselves carrying too much weight on their conscience." Helena looked at the man. 62 years old, black like her. His face marked by a life that probably hadn't been easier than hers. He was offering something rare, genuine humanity without expectation of return. "What if you find something wrong in your work?" she asked softly. "Something that can hurt people, but revealing it would mean losing everything you've gained." Mr. Oswald drank his coffee slowly before answering. "My father always said, your name goes on the tombstone when you die. Do you want your grandkids to read corrupt or honest? I chose honest. I'm poor, but I sleep at night." It was at that moment, in that small reception area smelling of cheap coffee and rain coming through the cracks of the old window, that Helena made her decision. She would translate everything faithfully. With absolute technical perfection, she would not omit a comma. But she would also prepare a second document, a detailed memo in German and English, listing all the irregularities she identified, with specific references to the problematic clauses and the Brazilian and German laws being circumvented. The memo would be delivered to the German client directly if necessary. Her professional integrity, the certification still registered under her name with the European Union and the UN, did not allow for complicity by omission. Even if it cost everything, she worked 3 nights straight without sleep preparing that second document. It was technically flawless, legally substantiated, and diplomatically worded. It wasn't an accusation, but a technical observation of potential non-compliance issues that may require additional clarification before contractual finalization. When she finished at 5 in the morning on a Tuesday as the city began to wake, Helena saved both files on separate flash drives. One with the complete translation, the other with the memo, and then, finally, she slept. 4 hours of deep, dreamless sleep on the small reception couch, with Mr. Oswald conducting his rounds in silence so no one would disturb her. The last month was a race against time where every day seemed to have only 20 hours. Helena worked in a trance, her fingers typing automatically even when her mind began to float from exhaustion. The human body has limits, and she was discovering exactly where hers were. Richard also began to change. At first, he observed the progress with that toxic mix of resentment and forced gratitude. But something began to crumble in his shell of arrogance. Perhaps it was seeing her, day after day, completing that impossible challenge. Perhaps it was the unquestionable quality of the work. Or perhaps it was, finally, the beginning of shame, an emotion with which he had little familiarity. One Thursday afternoon, 10 days before the German client's arrival, Richard found Helena cleaning the boardroom windows. The afternoon sun created golden patterns through the glass, and for a moment, in that light, he saw not the uniform, but the person. "Who were you?" he asked suddenly, surprising himself. "Before working here?" Helena stopped cleaning. She looked at her distorted reflection in the window. A 48-year-old woman, too thin, with premature wrinkles around her eyes from squinting at bright screens in short nights. But she also saw behind that image the shadow of who she had been. "Someone who translated for people you would consider important," she replied, her voice low but firm. "Ambassadors, directors of UN agencies, economy ministers at OAS conferences. I sat in glass booths wearing headphones, translating in real time while they decided policies that affected millions. And they depended on me for every word to be right." Richard was very quiet. "Why did you stop?" "Because my mother was dying of cancer and needed someone to hold her hand. Because I chose care over career. And because when I tried to return, I found that the market doesn't forgive black women who pause their lives for acts of love." She returned to cleaning the glass, ending the conversation. "Now finish checking page 72. There is an ambiguity in the termination clause that you need to clarify before I translate the final version." It was true, he had found exactly that ambiguity. How did she know? Because she had already read the original document 6 times, memorizing every nuance, noticing problems that expensive lawyers had missed. That night, alone in his 3,000-square-foot apartment in the Upper East Side, Richard did something he hadn't done in how many years? He researched. He typed Helena Jackson Translator Washington, D.C. into Google, and he found it. Old photos on archived pages of international conferences from the 2000s. Translation team for the 2008 OAS Summit. And there she was, younger, wearing professional attire, smiling with other translators in front of the State Department building. Helena Jackson Frary, German-English simultaneous translator, certified by the European Union of Associations of Translation Companies. There were mentions in conference programs, references in acknowledgments of translated academic books, an outdated LinkedIn profile showing education from the University of Heidelberg with a master's in conference interpreting. She wasn't lying. It was all true. Richard closed the laptop and stared at the bedroom ceiling, the air conditioner whispering in the silence. For the first time in his privileged life, he confronted an uncomfortable truth. Competence doesn't wear a predefined uniform. Dignity is not determined by salary. And he had spent 5 years working in a building where there were likely other hidden talents he hadn't even noticed existed. Because, after all, who truly looks at the people who clean floors? The week before the German client's arrival was a chaotic whirlwind. The translation was complete, 85 pages of technical legal perfection representing 2 months of superhuman work. Helena delivered the flash drive with the final document on a Monday morning, along with a detailed index and a glossary of technical terms. Richard read compulsively for 3 days. He verified every clause, compared them with originals, and sent 5 random pages to a certified translator for blind verification. All returned with confirmation. Perfect translation, impeccable terminology, exemplary capture of nuance. How? The question continued to echo, but now it had a different tone. No longer, how is it possible? But, how did we let this happen? Let competence like this remain invisible, reduced to cleaning restrooms. Dr. Klaus Hartmann arrived on a rainy Tuesday in March, accompanied by 3 German lawyers from a Prestige ES Hamburg firm: Dr. Friedrich Mahler, M&A specialist, Dr. Sabine Weber, tax attorney, and Dr. Johann Schneider, international compliance consultant. The meeting was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon in the boardroom on the 18th floor, the same room where, 2 months earlier, Richard had made his cruel bet. Richard was nervous to a level bordering on pathological. His tie was adjusted 4 times. He took 2 anti-anxiety pills and 3 espressos, a probably dangerous combination. When the Germans entered, with their executive leather briefcases and neutral professional expressions, he felt his stomach churn. "Good afternoon, Herr Sterling." Dr. Hartmann greeted him with a guttural accent. "We received your translation. Very impressive. Our legal department conducted a preliminary check and approved the technical quality." Richard relaxed minimally. "I'm glad it met expected standards." The meeting proceeded for 2 hours. Discussion of clauses, negotiation of terms, adjustments to values. Everything technical, everything professional. It was going perfectly. Then Dr. Mahler, the specialist lawyer, closed his laptop and asked a casual question. "Herr Sterling, would it be possible to meet the responsible translator? There are 2 linguistic nuances in the contract termination clauses I'd like to clarify. They are subtleties of legal German that require direct explanation." Richard's blood froze. The translator is unavailable at the moment," he quickly improvised. "But I can relay your questions and—" "We prefer to speak directly," Dr. Hartmann interrupted politely but firmly. "It is our protocol in negotiations of this magnitude. We need to ensure nothing was lost in translation." Richard felt genuine panic, the kind that tightens the chest and makes breathing difficult. He looked around the room, his assistant, 2 U.S. lawyers, the executive secretary, all waiting. And then, in a desperate impulse that surprised even himself, Richard did something unexpected. Something he wouldn't fully be able to explain later. Perhaps it was delayed honesty. Perhaps it was the weight of accumulated shame. Or perhaps, for the first time, he wanted to do the right thing. "Please call the linguistic consultant," he said to the secretary, his voice trembling slightly. Helena was found where she always was at 2:40 in the afternoon, cleaning the men's restroom on the 12th floor with rubber gloves up to her elbows, the smell of disinfectant saturating her uniform. When the secretary, clearly embarrassed, relayed the request, there were seconds of silence where Helena merely processed the information. "He wants me to go into a meeting with executives like this?" She looked at her own reflection in the bathroom mirror. Uniform soaked with cleaning products, hair pulled back in a simple bun, hands red and peeling. He said it's urgent, that the Germans want to speak with whoever did the translation. "I don't understand, but—" The secretary seemed genuinely confused. Helena took a deep breath. She removed the gloves, washed her hands 3 times with soap, and dried them. She adjusted her uniform as best she could. And then, with the dignity she had maintained through 2 years of invisibility, she walked to the elevator. When she entered the boardroom still in uniform, with hands red from caustic chemicals but the erect posture of decades of professionalism, the silence was absolute. The American lawyers looked confused. The Germans, polite, merely lifted slightly from their chairs. Richard was pale. Dr. Muller, pragmatic, broke the silence. "You are the translator responsible for the document?" "Yes," Helena replied in English, her voice firm. "Hervorragend. Ich have einige Vergen bezüglich Kündigungsklauseln." He continued in fluent German. "Excellent. I have some questions regarding the termination clauses." And it was at that moment that the most dramatic transformation occurred. Helena responded in German, without an accent, with perfect academic diction, with the fluency of someone who had studied in Germany, lived the language, and immersed herself in its technical structure for years. "Selbstverständlich, Herr Dr. Muller." Die Kundigungsfristenbesiehen sich auf Paragraph 314 BGB was in der Brasilianischen Rechtsordnung den Artikeln 473 und 474 des Zivilgesetzbuchs entspricht. Certainly, Dr. Mahler. The termination periods refer to paragraph 314 of the German Civil Code, which in the Brazilian legal system corresponds to articles 473 and 474 of the Civil Code. The entire room gaped, but Helena didn't stop. She expanded on the answers, analyzed nuances, suggested improvements to 3 clauses that were syntactically ambiguous in the German original. She cited comparative jurisprudence from German and U.S. Supreme Courts. She demonstrated knowledge that expensive lawyers take years to accumulate. The Germans were impressed. Dr. Hartmann leaned forward, completely forgetting formal protocol. Entschuldigung, he said. Excuse me, what is your exact academic background? And for the first time in 2 years of self-imposed invisibility, Helena replied with a voice that did not tremble, reclaiming every syllable of identity that had been buried beneath a uniform and humiliation. Masters in Translation and Interpretation from the University of Heidelberg, Germany. Specialization in Legal Translation from the Faculty of Translation and Interpretation in Geneva. 15 years of active experience as a simultaneous translator at international conferences, including OAS summits, UN conferences, and bilateral negotiations at the State Department. Certifications from the European Union of Associations of Translation Companies and the International Association of Conference Interpreters. Inactive member, due to temporary personal circumstances, of the American Translators Association, ATA. Richard's jaw literally dropped. The American lawyers exchanged shocked glances. The secretary dropped her pen. Dr. Hartmann, after seconds of processing, smiled genuinely. Temporary, you say? Because my corporate group is seeking specialized linguistic consultants in German legal finance for permanent advisory roles. We pay in euros, remote work possible. If you are interested, we can discuss a separate contract after finalizing this deal. Helena, exhausted from 2 months of sleeping 3 hours a night, undernourished from skipping meals, her body aching from double shifts, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Validation, recognition not as a favor, but as a right earned through competence. I will be interested, yes, she replied professionally, but the final twist was yet to come. After the meeting, when the Germans left for dinner and would return the next day for the preliminary signing, Richard called Helena into his private office. It was 7 in the evening. The city sparkled below. He was standing in front of the window holding a check. When he turned, he had an expression she had never seen before. Something between genuine gratitude and deep shame. $300,000, he said, extending the check. As agreed, and I would like to apologize for the way I proposed this, for the way I treated you. You saved my career, my reputation, and I disrespected you from the very first moment. Helena took the check. The paper was thin and light, but it represented 2 years of her cleaning salary. It represented the relief of Julia's dreams being realized. I accept the payment, she said calmly, but I do not accept the apology. Richard recoiled, confused. You don't accept it? An apology suggests it was a temporary lapse. But it wasn't. It was who you are, Mr. Sterling. A man who sees people like me and assumes incompetence because of a uniform and skin color. An apology doesn't change that. Only consistent actions over time could. So keep your apology. Observe whether your behaviors truly change. She turned to leave, but Richard spoke again. Wait, there's one more thing. Helena paused at the door. I found irregularities during my final review of the original German documents. Questionable fiscal structures. Undisclosed accounts. I was wondering how. I know. Helena cut him off. I identified the same irregularities. She pulled an additional flash drive from her worn bag. I prepared a technical memo detailing all the legal nonconformities I found, in German and English. My ethical obligation as an internationally certified professional is to report discoveries of potential illegality. I translated faithfully as contracted. But I cannot be an accomplice by omission. She placed the flash drive on the desk. Richard was livid. Do you realize this could destroy the entire deal? That you could lose the opportunity with the Germans? That it's the right thing to do? Helena finished. Yes, I realize. And she left, leaving Richard alone with the flash drive and a moral choice he had never honestly needed to face before. The next morning, when the Germans returned for finalization, an additional meeting was scheduled. Dr. Hartmann, Dr. Mahler, and Dr. Weber sat looking serious at Richard and Helena, who was explicitly invited this time as linguistic technical consultant. Sitting at the table in clean clothes she had bought at a consignment shop on the way. We received a technical memo last night. Dr. Hartmann began, his expression neutral, detailing financial irregularities in the original documents we submitted. Richard sweated cold. We want to clarify, the German continued, that these irregularities were the responsibility of a corrupt minority partner, Herr Volkmar Steiner, whom we already suspected but lacked documentation to prove. The memo provided detailed technical evidence that will allow us to remove this problematic element before finalization. The deal will be restructured, now genuinely legal and transparent. He looked directly at Helena. Your professional integrity saved all of us from involvement in a potential future scandal. My group thanks you. And the consulting contract I offered yesterday? It just doubled in value. We need people of this moral caliber working for us. Richard was stunned. The deal had been saved, not destroyed. Cleaned, not stained. And all because the woman he mocked possessed something he was only beginning to learn. Unconditional integrity. In the following months, transformations happened in cascade. Helena did not return to cleaning. With the $300,000, she paid 2 years of accumulated expenses, enrolled Julia full-time in college, eliminating the need for part-time work, and used the remainder for professional repositioning. A new computer, renewal of certifications, professional website, sessions with a photographer for corporate images. The German consulting contract paid €4,000 monthly for 20 hours of remote work weekly. In 3 months, she had 3 additional corporate clients. Richard, forced to confront prejudices he had carried his whole life unquestioningly, took steps that surprised even his partners. He established a formal program called the Hidden Talent Initiative, a partnership with HR to actively identify service staff with qualifications that the market had rendered invisible. 3 women were discovered in the first semester. Carla Rodriguez, a cleaner on the 10th floor, had a full accounting degree but had been unemployed for 6 years after an abusive divorce destroyed her professional references. She was rehired as a junior accounting analyst. Grace Miller, from the pantry, was a certified nurse who lost her professional license because she couldn't afford renewal after her husband died in an accident. The firm paid for regularization, and she became the corporate occupational health nurse. Vanessa Thompson, from the night cleaning crew, had a 20-year-old degree in data processing, but the IT market considered her obsolete at 52. A sponsored retraining course, and she joined the technical support team. It wasn't benevolence. It was Richard learning the most expensive way possible that competence exists in places privileged people were educated not to see, and that human dignity should not be conditional on temporary economic position. The legacy, he would later be forced to admit, was the most expensive and valuable lesson a cleaner taught him without ever having to verbalize it. Respect people not for what they wear, but for what they are capable of being when the opportunity arises. 6 months after that fateful Friday when every Ing began with a cruel bet, Helena returned to that same high-rise on Park Avenue. But not through the service elevator that smelled of cleaning products and accumulated sweat. Through the executive one, with gilded mirrors and soft background music. She wore professional attire bought specifically for this. Not expensive designer clothes, but suitable, clean clothing that fit her correctly. Hair professionally styled. She carried a tasteful, full-leather executive brief. She had a linguistic consulting meeting for another corporate client contacted through the German's referral. Mr. Oswald, the night security guard who had left quiet coffees during impossible pre-dawn shifts, saw her passing. He was at the bus stop in front of the building, finishing his shift. Their eyes met through the glass, and Helena smiled, genuinely smiled, waving with visible gratitude. He waved back, his eyes moist. 42 years working in night security, he had seen many things, but rarely had he seen justice happen so visibly. Helena entered the building. She announced herself at the reception desk. Helena Jackson Frary, linguistic consultant, meeting at 10 o'clock with the legal department. The receptionist smiled professionally, checked the system. Ah yes, Dr. Jackson. 16th floor, room 1604. Welcome, Dr. Jackson. The word sounded strange, familiar, correct. In the elevator, ascending the floors, Helena allowed herself a moment of reflection. There was no magic in this story. There were no divine coincidences or extraordinary luck. There was competence kept alive in the shadows for years, even when no one saw its worth. There was dignity preserved in invisibility, even when it would have been easier to let bitterness corrode her. And there was the courage to reclaim her space when the opportunity finally arose, even when that opportunity came disguised as humiliation. Julia was now studying full-time. She was doing well, perhaps dreaming of graduate school. The apartment in the Bronx was still home for now, but there were plans to move in 6 months. Nothing extravagant, just a small, rented apartment in a closer neighborhood. But it would be theirs, earned through honest work. The recognition Helena received didn't fundamentally change her. She remained the woman who chose integrity over ease, who carried 3 dictionaries for 15 years waiting for the chance to use them again, who refused $50,000 in bribery because her name mattered more than money. The difference was that now, finally, the world was beginning to see what had always been there. The elevator doors opened on the 16th floor. Helena stepped out with firm, professional steps, carrying in her brief not just work documents, but years of invisible resilience finally recognized. And as she walked down that marble corridor where she once only cleaned floors, a profound truth resonated. Dignity was never about temporary economic position. It was always about the daily choices of who to be when no one is watching. She made her choices, and now she was reaping the consequences, not as a magical reward from the universe, but as the natural result of preserved competence and character maintained even in the most difficult circumstances. And you, how many Helena Jacksons are around you every day, competent, qualified, dignified people, who have been made invisible by temporary circumstances, social prejudices, and collective failures to see value where it truly exists. If this story touched your heart, if you recognize that human dignity doesn't wear a predefined uniform, hit that like button now. This small gesture helps us continue telling stories that challenge prejudices and celebrate the silent triumphs of real people. Click the notification bell so you don't miss our next narratives of overcoming injustice. We publish new stories every Tuesday and Friday, always about ordinary people achieving extraordinary recognition through competence and character. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that temporary circumstances do not define permanent worth. Send it to that friend who is going through difficulties, to the family member who seems to have lost hope, to anyone who needs to believe that new beginnings are always possible. And in the comments, write the phrase, "Dignity doesn't wear a uniform." We want to see how much our community believes that human respect should be unconditional. Let's fill these comments with awareness. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are a growing community of people who believe in justice, recognition of real merit, and valuing human beings regardless of superficial appearances. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Your presence here validates that stories like Helena Jackson's matter. That social invisibility is a real problem that deserves conversation. That we can all do better by observing, respecting, and offering opportunities for hidden competencies around us. Until the next story. And remember, every person you meet today might be a Helena Jackson waiting for someone to finally truly see her. Disclaimer: this is a fictional narrative created for educational and entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, companies, or situations is purely coincidental. The stories on this channel are inspired by universal archetypes of human triumph, but the specific characters, names, and events are entirely fictitious. Our goal is to inspire reflection on important social themes, such as dignity, prejudice, recognition, and justice, through dramatized narratives. Do not take this story as a factual or journalistic account.